The needle sits dead center, all calm. So everything's fine? This gauge measures temperature at exactly 1 point. 1. And an engine heats up in patches in some dead corner where the coolant has stopped moving. And the needle, meanwhile, honestly reads normal. It isn't lying to you. It just isn't measuring where the fire is. So there's a guy, 2 months of topping it up halfway and driving on. The dash looks fine, so everything must be fine. But in one spot, that metal has been living at a temperature it was never built for. One serious overheat, and you've got a blown head gasket, a warped block, melted pistons. $900 if you're lucky, up to $3,000 if the block has gone out of true. This isn't your fault. Cooling systems get checked with your eyes, not off the needle. And nobody ever taught you that. The prevention that cancels all of this out takes 15 minutes and costs less than $20. There's a 5-minute trick that flushes out the one thing no sensor will ever catch. That one's coming near the end. But first we have to name the main mistake. And it starts with an ordinary kitchen faucet.
The tank is a finger below the minimum line. The car has to move in 10 minutes. And there is a tap 2 steps away running clear as glass. You have drunk that water your whole life. Nobody has ever been harmed by it. So in it goes, the cap goes back on, the car drives perfectly, and the temperature needle sits exactly where it always sits. That is precisely why this habit survives generation after generation. It gives you no feedback. Not that day, not that month, not that year. But tap water, anywhere on earth, from any tap, no matter how clean it tastes, is carrying dissolved minerals. Calcium, magnesium, sodium, chlorides. Invisible and absolutely in there. The moment that liquid climbs past 100 degrees Celsius, those minerals do what minerals do. They drop out of solution and crystallize onto whatever surface they happen to be touching. Radiator walls, engine passages, ceiling faces. Look inside an old coffee maker sometime. That pale crust welded onto the element, built out of nothing but clean-looking water, that is the exact same chemistry, happening in a place you can never reach with vinegar and a brush. The mineral does not leave, it plates. Every warm-up lays down another microscopic layer, and you warm that engine twice a day, every day, for years, and none of it ever appears on your dashboard. And the layers do not spread politely across the whole system. They choose. They choose the 2 components that decide whether your engine is capable of cooling itself at all.
I pulled a thermostat out of a 12-year-old sedan once and set it on the fender so the owner could look at it. The ceiling face was furred over, pale and chalky, the way anything goes when it sits in hard water long enough. That fur was why it had been opening late for 2 years. The mechanism could no longer move cleanly, so the coolant only reached the radiator after the engine already needed it there. The owner had reported nothing wrong with the car, nothing at all. The only thing he had ever noticed was that the cabin heater took a little longer to warm up on cold mornings than it used to, and he had simply gotten used to it. Scale picks its targets. The thermostat is one. The water pump is the other, where it grinds at the seals until they weep. Everywhere else it narrows the passages, and narrowed passages choke the flow, and choked flow builds hotspots, small pockets of metal running far above the average, hot enough to deform the aluminium around them. None of that shows up as a warning light. It shows up as a number at the end of the car's life. I have seen 2 identical engines, same factory, same model year, same climate. One went past 250,000 kilometers and was still pulling strong. The other was finished at 100,000, dead from chronic overheating it never once complained about. Go through the entire history of both cars, and the only meaningful difference between them is which tap the water came from. Distilled water has no minerals in it, none. Evaporation and condensation strip them out, and that is the entire point of it. It goes in, it carries heat, and it leaves nothing behind, ever. It is the correct liquid to dilute your coolant with, the correct thing to reach for in an emergency top-up, and it costs less than a sandwich at any pharmacy or hardware store. That bottle sits on the shelf right next to the coolant, and drivers walk past it for years. Meanwhile, narrowed passages run hotter, and a hotter system runs at higher pressure, and that is the pressure the next mistake gets made against, with a bare hand resting on the cap.
Needle in the red, car on the shoulder, steam curling out from the gaps in the hood. The man leans directly over the cap with a rag wrapped around his hand because that is what he once watched somebody do. The rag protects a palm. It protects absolutely nothing above the wrist. Understand what is sitting behind that cap. A hot engine means a pressurized cooling system, and that is not a flaw, that is the design. Pressure is the only reason the liquid is not boiling. So what is in there is not water at 100 degrees. It is water held above its own boiling point by pressure alone, waiting. The instant the seal breaks, the pressure is gone, and the liquid flashes into a column of steam and boiling coolant aimed straight up. Third-degree burns. Permanent scarring across faces and forearms. Nobody invented that warning to sound cautious. It is a documented, repeated outcome, and emergency rooms see it every summer. And here is the geometry that catches people who are not careless at all. Every single person who does this is bent over the opening. They have to be. Leaning over it is the only way to read the level. The jet has exactly one direction available to it, and there is a face in that direction. So the rule is boring, and it is not negotiable. Minimum 1 hour after shutdown before you open anything. 2 is better. If you want to speed it up, open the hood while it sits. That genuinely helps. Opening the cap early cools nothing. It only moves the heat onto you. On the road it is 4 steps. Pull over, shut it off, wait until it is cold. Then look. Now suppose you do every bit of that correctly. You wait, you use distilled water, correct type, filled to the correct line, cap on firm. There is still a version of this story where the coolant inside your car has been completely finished for years and the level reads full the entire time.
There was a car in my shop that had never lost a drop. Not one. Same coolant it came with when the owner bought it. Level sitting dead on maximum. Color still bright enough to look new in the bottle. Then the heater core started weeping at a seam. And when we pulled it out and looked at the aluminium around the failure, it was pitted. Eaten. Like something had been chewing on it from the inside. Nothing had ever leaked. Nothing had ever boiled. Nothing had ever appeared on the dash. Coolant is not just liquid. It is a liquid carrying a package of additives, anti-corrosion, antioxidant, and those additives are consumed. They deplete on a clock, whether you drive the car hard every day or leave it parked in a garage all winter. The level does not change. The color barely changes, but the protection runs out. And once it is gone, the liquid does not go neutral. It switches sides. Your engine has different metals sharing the same fluid. Aluminium heads, a copper or aluminium heater core, iron, steel, and with the additive package spent, they begin corroding electrolytically. The softer metal surrenders its material to the harder one, through the liquid, molecule by molecule. That car had run out of additives years earlier, and then sat there for 6 more years, quietly doing chemistry on its own engine. So a full tank of old coolant is not still fine. It is working against you, and every gauge you own will insist everything is perfect. If this is the first time anyone has told you that coolant expires on a calendar and not on a level, hit the like button, because there are a lot of drivers out there with a full tank, zero protection, and no idea. Which is exactly why the interval has nothing to do with the level. All of it comes out every 2 years, or every 40,000 kilometers, whichever arrives first. And the names on the bottles will not help you. Antifreeze, coolant, the same product wearing different marketing. And none of those words tell you how much life is left in your tank. You can measure it, and almost nobody does. Test strips read the additive condition and the acidity. A refractometer reads the concentration. Both together cost less than 1 visit to a shop. And there is something invisible sitting at the highest point of your engine right now that no strip and no refractometer will ever find. A driver came back to me after paying for a full coolant service somewhere else. His complaint was tiny. The gauge had not moved a hair, temperature completely normal. But the cabin heater was blowing cold air on a cold morning. Cold air from the heater, with a full tank of brand new coolant, is not a heater fault. It is a report. It means the liquid is not reaching the highest loop in the system, and if it is not reaching there, then something up there is being cooled by air instead of by liquid. Every time you top up, and above all, every time you refill after draining the system, you trap air in the passages.
That air does not stay where you put it. It migrates upward and settles at the high points, up near the cylinder head, at the thermostat, inside the body of the heater core. Think of a straw with a bubble stuck in the bend. Liquid stops moving through that section entirely, and where circulation stops, heat builds, a hot spot, tight and local, cooking one small area of metal while the rest of the engine behaves perfectly. Here is the cruelty of it. Your temperature sensor sits where the liquid is. That is the only place it can sit. So the gauge is not broken and it is not lying to you. It is telling you the honest truth about a part of the engine that is completely fine, while a bubble the size of your thumb presses against the cylinder head and lets that one spot climb. If your system has never been purged, there is very likely air in it right now. Most modern cars have a bleed valve for exactly this reason, a small screw near the thermostat or on the upper radiator hose. You leave the tank cap open, run the engine until it reaches normal operating temperature, and crack that valve until coolant comes out with no bubbles in it. 15 minutes and a screwdriver. Some cars do not have one and need gravity purging or a model-specific tool, so check yours before you go hunting for a screw that does not exist. An air pocket can be pushed out. What can occupy those same passages next cannot be pushed out at all, not with a flush, not with pressure, not with anything short of a wrench.
The pickup was low on coolant on a Sunday, with everything closed. The only bottle in the house was left over from a different car, sitting on the garage shelf, the same shade of pink. Near enough. In it went. The truck drove home fine. 2 weeks of nothing at all. Then the temperature started climbing on hills, and when the upper hose came off, what came out was not liquid. It came out in a slow, thick rope like cold honey off a spoon, and it had already taken the radiator's narrow tubes with it. Every manufacturer designed its cooling system around one specific coolant chemistry, not a general category, a specific one. Put two different chemistries into the same system, and they do not dilute each other, they react. They form a gel, a paste, and that paste plugs radiator passages, the water pump, and the internal passages of the engine itself. There is no undo on this one. Scale can be flushed, air can be bled, dead coolant can be drained and replaced. This mistake converts a working cooling system into a solid, and the only fix is taking it apart to be washed out, with the radiator very often replaced outright, because those tubes are too fine to ever clean. So the rule is simple. Same type, same color, and where you can, same brand as whatever is already in there. And if you genuinely do not know what is in the tank, you bought the car used, the last owner is a mystery, then add nothing. Nothing at all. Have the system fully flushed and correctly refilled instead. That job costs about what you spend on a tank of fuel. The repair on the other side of a wrong pour runs into the thousands. One more thing about color, because this is where the expensive mistakes are actually made. Color is not a standard. Manufacturers dye whatever they like. Greens tend to be the older chemistry, oranges and reds the organic acid type, and two bottles of identical pink can be two chemistries that turn each other into paste. That pickup is the proof, and its owner matched the color perfectly. Matching the chemistry correctly is still not enough. There is a way to buy exactly the right coolant, add nothing else to it whatsoever, and make your engine run hotter than it did before you touched it. A man I know read the label carefully, chose the most expensive bottle on the shelf, and poured it in undiluted on purpose. His logic was airtight as far as he could see. If the 50-50 version protects the engine, then the full-strength version has to protect it more. He was not being lazy and he was not being cheap. He was being generous with his car. And that engine spent the following summer running warmer than it had in 10 years. Coolant is sold two ways. Concentrate is 100% coolant, and it is meant to be mixed in equal parts with distilled water before it goes anywhere near your engine. Pre-diluted, usually labeled ready to use, is already mixed 50-50 at the factory and goes straight in. Read which one you are holding at the counter, because on the shelf, those bottles look almost identical. Pure concentrate cools worse than the 50-50 mix. Not slightly, measurably worse,
Because its capacity to carry heat is lower. Water is the better heat carrier of the two. It always was. The coolant is in there to raise the boiling point, lower the freezing point, and deliver the additive package that keeps your metals from eating each other. The water is what actually lifts the heat off the engine and moves it to the radiator. Take the water out, and you have thrown away the working fluid and kept the packaging. On top of that, pure ethylene glycol goes after your gaskets and seals directly. So the engine runs hotter and its internal parts wear faster at the same time, because somebody tried harder than the manual asked him to. If pure concentrate went into your car, do not wait it out. Drain it and refill with the correct mixture. Equal parts mixed in a clean container first, not poured in separately and hoped about. There is one habit left, and it is the most dangerous of the 7. Not because it is careless, because it looks exactly like maintenance.
Every second Saturday, a bottle out of the trunk. Half a liter in, cap on, done. 18 months of that, and his coolant never once ran dry. His wife thought he was the most careful driver she knew. Nobody ever asked him where the missing liquid was going. Here is the rule that saves engines. If your level drops every week or every month with no obvious reason, stop refilling it. You do not have a consumption problem. Engines do not consume coolant. You have a leak, and refilling is not treatment. Sometimes you will find it easily. An aging hose gone soft at the clamp, a seam in the radiator, a wet trail down the face of the water pump. Those are the good outcomes. The one to fear is a loss with no puddle under the car, nothing on the driveway, ever. Because that means the coolant is leaving through the engine and being burned in the cylinders. That one has a signature you can read from outside the car. Exhaust that smells faintly sweet. Thick white vapor that keeps coming after the engine is fully warm and never thins out. Cold morning steam disappears once the engine heats up. This does not. That is what he had. Nothing on his driveway for 18 months, because the whole time it was going out of the tailpipe, as a faintly sweet white cloud he had long since stopped noticing. 18 months of disciplined, diligent care that was in fact 18 months of feeding a failing head gasket. The repair at the end was the same repair it would have been at the start, just bigger. And by then it had company. 2 more things while you are standing at that tank. Those molded lines, maximum and minimum, are engineering limits, not suggestions. The system needs headroom above the liquid, so it has somewhere to expand into when it heats. Fill past maximum, and you push coolant out of the overflow, which looks exactly like a leak, and sends you chasing a fault that does not exist. And the radiator cap is a wear item that almost nobody ever replaces. Inside it there is a spring and a seal, and their entire job is holding the system's pressure, the same pressure that keeps your coolant from boiling. A tired cap bleeds that pressure off. The boiling point drops with it, and you get overheating that no amount of fresh coolant in the world will fix. All 7 of these come down to one procedure, and the procedure ends with the switch I promised you.
Cold engine. That is where it begins, and there is no shortcut around it. 1 hour minimum after shutdown, 2 if you can wait, and pop the hood while it sits. That genuinely speeds things up. You work at the expansion tank. Semi-transparent plastic, minimum and maximum lines molded into the side, usually near the radiator. That is the tank. You do not open the radiator cap directly, not on a hot engine, not on a cold one, not ever, unless you are draining the system on purpose. Read the level before you touch anything. Above minimum, you are only monitoring, leave it alone. Below minimum or empty, you top up. Find out which type your car requires. It is in the manual or on the last container if you still have it. Same type, same color, preferably same brand. If you are buying concentrate, buy a liter of distilled water on the same trip and mix them in equal parts in a clean container before a single drop goes into the car. Pre-diluted, skip that step. Open the cap slowly with a rag over it, in case there is residual pressure.
Pour through a clean funnel up to the maximum line and not 1 millimeter past it. Close it firmly. Now the step almost nobody performs. Start the engine and let it run for 5 minutes with the cabin heater set to maximum heat. Then recheck the level and top back up to maximum if it has dropped. Here is why the heater. Your heater core is a small radiator at the far end of the loop, and in most cars, it sits at the highest point in the entire system. With the heater switched off, its valve stays closed, and coolant simply never travels down that branch. So you can fill the tank right to maximum, screw the cap on, and drive away satisfied, leaving a whole section of your engine holding nothing but air at the top, where heat collects, exactly where you can least afford it. 5 minutes with the heater on full opens that valve, forces liquid all the way through the branch, and lets the trapped air rise out into the tank you left open. That is why the level drops after those 5 minutes. It was never full to begin with. Top it back to maximum, and only then is the job actually finished. That was the man on the flatbed. Correct coolant, correct color, maximum line, every receipt in order, and a switch inside his cabin he had never once turned on while topping up. If your car has a bleed valve and you have just drained the system, purge it properly while you are in there.
Then watch it, every 15 days for the first 2 months, monthly after that. If it keeps dropping, you are not topping up anymore. You are looking for a leak. 7 habits. 1 shared mistake. Treating a sealed, pressurized, chemically specific circuit like a bucket that needs some liquid in it. Minerals plating the passages layer by layer. A cap that fires boiling liquid straight up into a face. A full tank of coolant that quit years ago and switched sides. A bubble the gauge cannot see, cooking one spot on the head. A gel that turns a radiator into scrap in an afternoon. A concentrate that cools worse than the mix, poured in by the man trying hardest. And a level topped up on a calendar, instead of investigated once. So today, before you forget, go out to a cold engine and read the tank. Find out which coolant type your car requires and write it inside the fuel door with a marker, so you never guess at a parts counter again. Buy a liter of distilled water and put it in the trunk, where the top-up bottle used to live. And buy a pack of test strips while you are there. They read the one thing the level, the color, and your dashboard cannot. Then find the date of the last full change. If nobody knows the date, the change is overdue. A few dollars of prevention against a head gasket bill in the thousands. That is the whole trade. So which one were you? The man with the tap running 2 steps away? Or the man topping up on a schedule who never once asked where the liquid was going? Tell me in the comments, and be honest. Because half of you are one, and half of you are the other. And both of you thought you were doing it right. And subscribe, because there is one thing worse than doing all of this wrong, doing all of it perfectly, on an engine that has already been quietly telling you it is too late. That is the conversation we are having next.